Get yourself into the events that you can find many people like you. Get to know people who want to start a venture like you do and go to those events, whether they are pitch competitions or venture capital industry events or accelerator events. I think if I could have been a man, maybe I would have ended up in that private company and not in the development bank. And my life would have been different, but my influence in the world would have been much less than what I did. So my decision in the end was not about how many zeros to add to my paycheck. Maybe we should write a book on the men who don't have a chip on their shoulders and are proud of the accomplishments of their wives.
Why women are discounted for making small mistakes and men aren't?
Depending on the country, men too are also put down if they make mistakes. But I would say that we personally tend to be more down if we make a mistake.
Thanks a lot, Susanna, for being on our show today. It's a pleasure to have you, and I can't wait for you to share about your work that you've done for the community of women with our audience. But to begin with, would like to learn from you about your journey. You've been born and brought up in Argentina, and I read in one of your interviews that you were raised by a mother and grandmother with two sisters around. So it was not very difficult for you to grow up in an environment where you had to face a lot of challenges, but you had good support from your family itself. So how was it then growing up in Argentina and then moving to Latin America and pursuing your career in investing?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I love doing these interviews because I think for a woman like me who has been for over 23 years doing investments in venture capital, I don't fit the typical profile. And I love that. I've been living in the US for many decades. I moved from Argentina, as you said. My family was not typical either. I was raised mainly by my grandmother and my mother. My father was around, but living in another country, so he was a figure in my life, and I inherited a lot of his traits as well. He loved history, and I love history, but my education was in the hands of my mother and my grandmother. Um, our sisterhood with them growing up and then with my two other sisters was always strong, especially my two sisters. Each one of us has taken on a very different professional and personal path, and yet we always held to our values and principles and thinking that being a woman was not something that was going to put us down. And I think that's important. The education I receive is you have certain gifts, intellectual, personal, you use them to the max. And you don't have to get into the dialectic, you're more or less because you are not a man. And I think, and it was done with no bitterness. It was a given, and I think that's important and it's a very good message. Then, when the moment came to do my undergrad studies, um, most of the vocational tests I took said that I should have studied economics. And I refused to do that. And I studied philosophy and education. And that's the first shock that people get when they know I've been doing business and my undergrad was in philosophy and education. Why? Because
Yeah.
I was interested in understanding uh, people, but in their totality, not just a person as a business person, but in their totality. So it wasn't until I moved to the US. My sister was already living here, married, beginning to have kids, and I wanted to meet my nieces. And my dad was here, that I realized that I didn't want to go on the typical tenure track of becoming a university professor. So I joined different nonprofits. where my main task, which I love to this day, was training and leadership for young women. So I was in touch with people from Latin America and from the US, and sometimes from other continents as well, Europe, that gave me an exposure of what it is to try to instill in young people leadership skills. So for one reason or the other, at some point, I decided to move to New York. In there, it was interesting. I got in touch and I began working with different mission countries to the UN and participate in several main global conferences in Cairo, Population and Development, in Istanbul, Habitat, in China, the Women's Conference. And I got to see too from firsthand that in the end, money talks. And I began to think, I don't know if I want to keep being in a nonprofit that is always running out of cash and you're always dependent on somebody giving you a grant. And maybe I prefer to look for a place that has plenty of money, believes in development, and I can look back at my region of origin, which by then I knew I wasn't gonna go back to live there permanently, but I wanted to give back. So a friend of mine at the time contacted me with an innovation lab within the Inter-American Development Bank that was called at the time the Multilateral Investment Fund. I did an internship. I loved it. I didn't want to be on the grant side. I wanted to be on the business side. By then, I had gotten a master's degree in Columbia University. But again, when given the choice, I did not go through an MBA. I did international economic policies. I took some classes in the business schools, and that was it. So here comes my other recommendation. At the end of the internship, I wanted to finish my last semester in Columbia University and immediately go back to DC and work there, but there was not a position created for me. So during that semester, it was very funny because almost every other weekend I would show up in DC visiting my family, but actually visiting the IDB and the manager and saying, "Oh, hi, I had something with my family. I just wanted to check in to see if there was a possibility of starting in March." And he would say, "Well, I'm trying to create a position in the budget, no news." And I kept going back and making sure he would not forget my face. So December came by. I graduated. I was in an off semester track, so I graduated in December. Took a month in Argentina, having a little bit of a vacation. Arrived back in New York, did my last UN trip to The Hague, and I came back and somebody called me and told me the budget is approved, you have a position. And I was delighted. And a few hours later, I got another call from another job possibility offering me 5 times the salary that they had offered me at the bank. And it was a private company. I was going to be working a little bit in Latin America and a little bit in some countries in Africa. And here comes another advice how to negotiate or not. So I tried to negotiate. I called back the bank and I said, "Well, listen, a few hours ago, I was given this incredible opportunity, blah, blah, blah." And the manager told me, "Listen, if you come to work with us, you'll understand budgets are set in stone after the board approves it. So I can't touch your salary. I think your work will be much more about salaries. And if I know you, I know what your decision will be, but otherwise, let's keep in touch. It's been wonderful having you for the summer." So I hung up and I was like, "Okay." Should I have the New York mentality? You have to earn right away as many zeros as possible in your paycheck, or you go for a job that I had a hint that was going to allow me to develop professionally, and it was a good salary, but not the best. So I thought, but not too much. And I said, I'm gonna follow my heart. And I called back and I said, no, I'm moving to Washington, D.C. again, and I'm going to start. And that was March 1st, 1999, and my venture capital journey started. And it was amazing. I was truly in an environment that allowed me to, open my wings and fly. I had people around me as my bosses that believe that making a mistake was gaining experience and not being a failure. And let's face it, where I come from, not only Argentina, but Latin America at the time, if you made a mistake, you were a failure. You didn't talk about mistakes because that immediately will downgrade you. People would only be boasting about the things that they did well. And so it was wonderful. And in the beginning, another lesson, I said, I really want to know this institution. So I will be working on projects that were grants. I will be working in microfinance that at the time was still very much taken by the development financial institutions like the one I had just joined. And I will be doing a little bit of venture capital. But by doing that, I was positioned enough that in less than a year, the person that at the time was leading venture capital decided to move to Bolivia and to another part in the Inter-American Development Bank. And he just came to me and said, I'm leaving for Bolivia. And literally, I was like, Ernesto, what am I going to do? You were my mentor. He said, I think you're ready. Just go talk to our boss and tell her you want to take over venture capital. And I did. And I took it like, this is my baby. Now run and catch me if you can. And it was wonderful. I will stop here. So, but it's been really an experience of trials and errors, not being afraid to make a mistake, to talk about them, and to talk about what you learn from your mistakes. And really, at the time that I left the Inter-American Development Bank to go into Capria, I had invested in 90 venture capital funds all over Latin America and the Caribbean. I had supported the creation of all the venture capital associations in the countries, plus the regional one. I had created angel networks for investing, regional and each country. I had done a lot of things that looking back, it was, wow, this is amazing. But it was amazing because I was also allowed to experiment, test, fail, and try again.
Yeah, picking up from what you said in the last line that you were allowed to, people have this mindset in their household, at least to begin with, that they should be permitted to do X or Y number of things. And that is the exact notion that we want to eradicate, that why do you need somebody's, permission? Why can't you just be so independent and so educational that you can make your own decisions and choices? But it was also very good to hear when you said that your boss allowed you to spread your wings and, do whatever you felt was right. But that is not the situation for most of the women in most of the companies. So how do you think in this challenge be addressed, and how can women come up in a much larger than life way? Because yeah.
It's very tough. I would advise that if you want to be a career woman, that does not exclude having a family life and having a personal life, whatever path you want to choose. You really have to develop what I call an elephant skin. Very tough not to think that when somebody makes a remark, is your problem. I used to, when somebody would make a remark like making me or attempting to making me feel little, I would immediately train myself to think, poor guy, is his problem. He doesn't understand that the world is composed by half the population or more being women, depending in which country you are based, and that the world is about, coming together with different visions. So one typical thing that happened to me was that, and it happens, I have talked to so many women, and you have to be prepared that many times, if you express your views with conviction and you don't allow others to really trample in an imaginative way on your ideas, you're perceived as very aggressive. And so, there were many moments in which I would say something in a meeting, nobody would react because the room was full of men. And then after a while, a man would repeat exactly what I had said, and somebody would say, "Oh, great idea." So I taught myself and I trained myself, and it was not easy to say, "Oh, lovely, Tom," or whoever was it. I see you adopted what I just said a few minutes ago. So you and I believe that, and I would repeat what was my idea. Nobody had recognized it as my idea. And when the guy said it, it was his idea. So, little by little, I began to be recognized as a force to be content with, and that really I will stand my ground. But I also learned another thing that for women, I think is difficult, which is I train myself not to take any of this as a personal offense. I didn't want to be always offended by these little biases. So I would get over immediately. I would always make it very professional. I wouldn't give a man who was discriminating personally, intentionally or not, the pleasure of, seeing me lose my cool, and that's important. So I would be addressing the issue in a very professional way, and I think you you gain your space not as quick as maybe men gain their space in business, but you do when you show that you are all about business. You're not gonna, put on a show of feelings that many times that's what you are expected to do if they treat you a little bit rough, and that you're gonna stand your ground, like a business person. Was that easy? In the beginning, it wasn't easy. Many times I had the feeling in an investment committee or in a meeting with investors that I felt like that flower pot put on the as a centerpiece in a table, and everybody was like, "Oh, little you," or even something that enraged me was, my name is Susana. In Latin America, nickname for Susana, and in English as well, is Susie. But I never introduce myself saying I'm Susie Garcia-Robles. I would say I'm Susana Garcia-Robles. And many men immediately would be, "Oh, hi, Susie, how are you?" And I hated that because at the time I was obviously much younger, and I felt that they were trying to put me in my place, like a decoration in the meeting. So I, I let it pass. And what I will do in that meeting is to come up with one or two ideas, not trying to take over the conversation, in which they would realize that this Susie was not a Barbie doll. It was somebody who had the power of her institution behind her and the ideas that were her own about how to do businesses.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult when you start your journey and give presentations basis your merit in a room full of men. I mean, at this age and stage, of course, anyone will say that it's your confidence that you have to pull it off, and you don't have to let emotions come in between business. And of course, that gets developed over time. But how is it that younger women, like you said, you yourself faced challenges and it was not so easy? How can young women who are, getting into the corporate field, or maybe into the legal field where the court is mostly full of men, how can they overcome such situations and tackle through it? And how is it that we can solve this problem? I mean, do you think having one or two women also in a room full of men will just help the situation in a better way?
Yes and no. Unfortunately, I have to say that, and that's why I have vowed to help any and every woman. But I've been in a room with few women, and they were not the most helpful either. They tried to make sure that their turf was covered
Hmm.
and didn't allow you to come in high because they felt threatened. So I would say that the best thing is, um, before, the stereotype was that women only were designed to be, in the kitchen or doing housework, etc. Now, I would say that in the corporate world, there is a different perception that maybe women are too aggressive, that they want to create the women's club, that they complain so much about the men's club. So for me, I would advise, if you can get a mentor who is a man and who doesn't have a bias, it's great. A mentor who is a man and a mentor who is a woman. So both sides of the equation. Um, what are the best mentors who are men? Those who have had daughters. Why? Because they love their daughters and they see their potential, and they wouldn't want to see their daughters be put down, obviously. So, I found that my first boss in the bank, he had four daughters. And if you see the composition of the innovation lab at the time, we were the only part and the Inter-American Development Bank that we were at 50+% of women and the rest were men. Why? Because he didn't have a conscious bias to add more women, but he didn't discriminate. So, of course, he kept finding more and more very good women professionals and promoting them. So, find a mentor who is a man to help you navigate that world of, many times cutthroat environment. Find also a mentor who is a woman who has committed, to do this kind of work. For me, every Friday, I take some hours to mentor young women fund managers, young women founders of tech companies, and also do men, because I think it's important for me not to be only focused on women. But there are many women I know that, because they have been on that tough uphill battle, they are willing to give back. But there are others who are not. And it's very sad when you see that. But still, you have to keep going. I think, too, there are certain things that are important and I have observed. It's not, I remember when I first went to Switzerland, every woman was in a gray, black, or navy blue suit with a very boring blouse. It's not about that. It's not like the 80s when you were encouraged to almost look like a man. You can be feminine, stylish, but you have to know that if you dress in a way that could be perceived as a little bit provocative, you are not doing a favor to yourself. If you are in social media, You have to make sure that you keep your personal life. You have to decide which outlet in social media will be for your personal life and which one for your professional life. And you're going to be inviting people. Like the typical thing when a client says, "Oh, can we connect it in Facebook?" My answer usually is, unless you want to see all my large family, tons of pictures of my nieces and nephews, I don't think it's worthwhile. Now, you want to be connected with me in Twitter and LinkedIn? Absolutely. So, Twitter and LinkedIn for me are ways in which I put forward what I'm doing, what my colleagues are doing, what my clients are doing. You will not see any political or religious opinion in those two channels because I feel I don't want to mix things. Actually, in Facebook, my norm is also about family and friends, not politics, no religious views. Instagram, I use it, but very limited. So you have to understand that when you post, and I see this with a lot of young women, when you post, you know, pictures when you were in college and maybe you drink one too many, well, recruiters are going to see that. What you post in the cyberspace will always stay in the cyberspace. So I have to say, when I recruit people, I do quite a bit of search in LinkedIn, in Twitter, trying to look at what you post in Facebook, and I do it for men too. I don't do different searches for men and women or women, but um, we have to be careful, because if we want to be taken seriously, our profiles have to be serious as well. I think, the other day, I'm going to tell you something. A colleague of mine was in a panel, and there were several women, and he was there, and other men as well. And he's the most open person you can imagine, right? But he made an observation to me that was for me, was very good. He said, do you know so and so? And I happen to know her not a lot, but I would say I know of her. And he said, I felt kind of bothered by her because she was so much trying to answer all the questions, didn't allow others in the panel to answer, and worst of all, didn't allow the other women in the panel to answer. I don't think that's good. And I said, no, I agree. That's not good. So we really have to find that middle ground, common sense, center, and not one extreme or the other, to be respected by the business community.
Yeah, but I have a follow on here. It's not that all and it's a mixture of both work, fun, experiences, everything. So do you think that men, women both should have the freedom to post whatever they want and not be judged basis that?
I think that the rule applies for men as well. I don't like it when I see that the guy is, he's an investment officer and he has been posting about being drunk with friends. I would apply the same rule. Maybe I'm
Hmm.
old fashioned, but I think it's important that you keep your personal and fun life away from your professional life. If somebody thinks that is okay, it should be okay for men and women. That I agree. In my case, I don't think it's okay. I think, some lines are not to be blurry, are more, this is my profession and this is how I want to be perceived. And so I don't like it when I see, young guys posting all that. And I usually tell them, your recruiter is gonna see that. And I don't know if it is okay. I don't know if it gives you any brownie points in your future as a professional, that you spend your weekends drunk. That's not very good. Even if you get to the office sober on Monday, fine, good, good for you. But different people may feel very differently. And I think if you feel it's okay, it should be okay for men and women. I
Yeah.
don't feel it's okay, neither for guys nor for women. So,
Yeah, that's right. But I have a curious question here, that what if the student, be it men or women, is extremely smart, well educated, and you know that once they join your company, they're going to move the needle. They are going to handle a team by themselves, are responsible, can do good groundwork. But you see some of these pictures on social media, like you said, it goes against your main philosophy and foundational values. Would you still not uh, would you still just miss out on that person? What is more important for you?
well, I would say if I would have a candidate as good as this one that doesn't have that side of his personality, maybe I would go for the other one. But on the other hand, I also respect personal lives of people. So, no, if he or she is the best candidate, I will do it. Absolutely, I would hire that person because that's another thing. Many people think that I would hire with my eyes closed any woman. No, I hire the best candidate. What I'm talking about is give women the chance to compete with men
Mm.
on the same ground, and you'll see an increase of women in positions. What happens is that many times they are not allowed to get on the same footing. And so their progression is slower, their salaries are lower, and they feel totally, put down or in the US, that is a forbidden question. In other countries, not. But some people in an interview would ask a woman, are you planning to have kids? And I think that is outrageous. Will they ask that of a guy? Are you planning to have kids? So, I think what we have to do is to level the play field for everybody. So I would always choose the best talent. And, maybe if she or he's doing very well, I would mention, are you aware that what goes in cyberspace stays there way beyond you are on the grade? And still, it's your decision. I'm very respectful of people's choices in their lives. And I would go for the best choice professionally.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Otherwise, otherwise, it would be a form of discrimination.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. But earlier, like you mentioned, that you wouldn't, I mean, it wouldn't move the needle even if a woman is sitting in a room full of men, because they are, wanting to secure their own position and not speak anything against if something is going wrong in the boardroom. So why do you think is that insecurity even there at the first place? Because I think if women are anyway secure in their minds, they would openly speak up if something wrong is happening in front of them, right? So what is it that makes them go into a shell?
For me, I really am having studied education. I do believe that is the way you're educated. And that's why teachers, and I'm not talking about, when people said, oh, you have to have a lot of leadership courses in college. Like, that's almost too late. You have to have that when you are a little girl and you begin to grow up and you begin to think, oh, I would like to study science, and nobody can tell you, oh no, science is for me. No? So education for me is key. Education at home and education in the schools. Like I tell you what happened to a colleague of mine. He was in Boston, and one day we were talking about something else, and he said, oh, Susana, I have to tell you this. You will love it. I'm like, what? Well, my 8-year-old girl the other day came after school and gave me a certificate. And I said, what is this? Well, the teacher today gave each one of us a certificate with which is allowing us to failure. To is a certificate for failure. And so the father said, what do you mean? Well, because she said, you are allowed to fail if you learn from your mistakes. And I love that. And I said, oh my God, I don't know who that teacher is, but I ran every year, I was running conferences for women in STEM. And I copied that idea. And when they would come to register at the event, I would give them a certificate to fail. And they were like, what is this? Because you're allowed to fail if you learn from your mistakes. Imagine if at 8 years old, we would have been taught that at home and at school. The world would be very different.
Yeah, I mean, charity begins at home, and your nurturing as well begins from that age, because by the time you get into the job, your mind is already matured into thinking that, okay, this is how it happens, and this is how I would want to be. But
Yeah.
you rightly mentioned that it needs to, start from the educational institutions itself. But that being said, have you actually seen a change come in to the curriculums in schools? Have they been teaching a new way of imparting this kind of soft skill within women?
I don't see it that much in the curriculum. I just see it in the teachers themselves that are much more aware of trying to get, for example, little girls interested in science, in the STEM career that for many, many years it was such a taboo field. Or worse, if you chose to go the route of a STEM career, you were supposed to be in the end a researcher working in a lab, whereas men were taking the STEM careers and becoming entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and that's why there was that lack of parity in that. I think all over the world we see more women entering STEM careers, more women becoming entrepreneurs, and even more women being able to say, I have a family and I'm a founder of a company. And I think it's also understanding that, men have to be treated also as parents, as fathers. We have to put responsibility on men. We have to have a better paternity leave, not only maternity leave. We have to allow them to feel that it's okay to say on Fridays, I have to pick up my kids from school. So, for example, we make it a point in Capria. We have several young people with kids. First of all, it's totally okay in the Zoom meeting that your kids are all over you, whether you're a woman or a man. That's reality. Let's face it. Then it's okay if all of a sudden you have to say, sorry, I have to cut off short. I call you later. My kid is crying and I don't know what happened. I mean, let's be more realistic. And that, in spite of the pandemic being so tough on us, was something that the pandemic helped a lot of people understand who is behind you and what's your world, because we couldn't hide it anymore. But I do think that I've seen a progress. There is a lot to be done, and it depends a lot on the countries. There are still a lot of countries that are, you find a lot of men in business that, excuse my French, they are all male chauvinists. And you have to deal with them, and you have to begin to try to go to those role models in that country that can help change the discourse. But overall, I think, some men um, totally got it independently from their generation, and they are your best supporters. And other men are more on notice that they should be more careful. And that, even though if it's not the best outcome, is good that they realize they cannot say whatever they want. They cannot be, you know, talking to you or saying things that can make you uncomfortable. it didn't happen a lot to me, but when it happened, I made sure that maybe if it was in a meeting, I didn't say anything, but then I looked for that person and I said, look, what you told me in that meeting was totally out of place. And you wouldn't say it to anybody else. And I ask you to think, if I were your daughter and somebody would be making that remark about me, how would you feel? So you have to get those men to be in your shoes and to understand how you feel when somebody treats you as an object. Mm. and and do it with dignity. One time, and it was in a different country in Latin America, I had to meet with somebody from the government that was known for being terrible in all accounts. And I I have to say I made a naive mistake maybe, but as you said, I never think, oh, I have to dress specifically for this guy who is a son of a gun. So I had a very nice coat, but it was um, baby pink, and I was very blonde and I was much younger. And so the guy was infuriated about my decision, my business decision, which my organization fully supported. And I was the leader of this potential investment. And I was telling him he had put some conditions that we were not going to accept. And therefore, we were going to withdraw. And the guy literally began to call me, it was in Spanish, oh, you little skinny blondie girl. And, the first time I heard that, I said, no, you can't be hearing that. You may be wrong, adjust your hearing. And the second time he said it, and we were only with just one person in the room, a colleague of mine who didn't say anything. I think he was in shock. And, I said, okay, this guy is really totally out of place and very bad how he's addressing me. But I'm not gonna win. So I just to this day, I'm like, I don't know how I had the guts to do that, but he was talking and addressing me in that way. So I just got up from my seat and I said, look, I understand you're the secretary of so and so, of the economics in that country, and you're very busy. But I'm too very busy. I came for a few days to your country, and we are going to end this meeting now. And we are going to end it remarking my decision. This project is not going forward, and I'm going to leave you now. There isn't much more that I'm willing to talk to you. And I began to walk, got to the elevator, and my colleague was like, wow, that was amazing. And I was like, yeah, let's get out of here. Let's go to a coffee and maybe I will begin to shake, but not in front of that son of a gun. So, I think I would have lost it if I would have tried to tell him you're being so offensive, whatever. So I just said, I'm gonna give him a lesson of being very professional. But the underlying message was, I'm the one calling the meeting off. I'm getting up from this seat and I'm walking out of your office. And it was tough. And I was kind of shaking when we were in the coffee place. But I said, okay, this is a lesson too. You have to make split-second decisions when you're being mistreated of which way to go. And I opted to show my power in a different way, not correcting him, who I didn't have any hopes that he would understand how he was mistreating me, but showing him that as a woman in business, I had the power to call off the meeting and walk out of his room. He didn't finish the meeting, I did. So,
Yeah, I mean, this story really gives me goosebumps, yet so much inspiration to take from. Because once you believe that the power also lies in your hand, you have the confidence automatically in you, to talk and say that, okay, what you're saying is absolutely wrong. And now you listen to me. I will tell you what needs to be done.
Yeah.
Because people are just nurtured to think in a way that, men maybe having the power, and it's their decision which will prevail. And what if I say something against them and the deal doesn't go through, or something goes against me, what will happen? But when you have that sense of self confidence, I think nothing can really stop a woman from putting her words across. But having said, yeah, 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 tell me.
No, and I would say also, but of course, we have to be well prepared to sustain our opinions with real data. So it can be just because I say so, because even if that holds in some places when a guy says, oh, yeah, I think this, and nobody asks him for any data backing up his opinion, I think in our case, whether we are asked or not, we have to show that we are very well professionally equipped to give our opinions. And if somebody challenges them, we have the data to back them up.
Yeah, data can't always go wrong at all. So that's something that speaks for itself. But talking on this, because I really can't believe that it's women who sometimes goes against women and not protect them. So how is it that I heard it in one of the interviews only, I think in yours, that you were advised that you might be the first women into this profession, but you should make sure that you will not be the last. And that can only come in with some sense of purpose, security, and the ability to elevate others as well to the level you have reached. So how can we, apart from the fact that you said we can change our educational system a little bit to make it more adaptable and comfortable, but what about the generation which is already past that educational level and is now in the working station, and it's their responsibility now to uplift younger women who are coming into different positions? So how can they support each other, and how can they empower them to reach to the levels that they have?
Well, I think one very important issue is the C word. Instead of competition, collaboration. I'm in an industry that can be very throat cutting, like venture capital, but the best ecosystems for venture capital are those in which you have collaboration among investors, founders of companies, male entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, male investors, female investors. So, what I would say is, we do it at Capria. For example, if one of us in my investment firm is about to write an article, once in a while, what we do is we choose one of the associates, and most of our associates are women, and say, why don't we co-author the article? So they begin to see the next generation coming forward. We do a lot of value add activities for partners that we have in our fund, but we are now focusing on their next generation of leaders, hoping that there will see the women that want to become, CEO, want to become a co-founder, want to become a junior partner, and we begin to tag them along the journey. And then when we talk to, for example, partner funds that we have, and if the partnership is only male, to say, I'm mentoring so and she really is good. Are you thinking of her as a potential junior partner in your firm? Oh, yes. Well, when? Give me your time frame. So, as a mentor, I can help you get her there. And we do this in my firm, um, all the partners, and three of them are men, and I'm a female. And what is important is that they are as convinced as I am that to have women in the business world improves your financial returns. Why? Because, and they know, they laugh whenever I begin stating these statistics because I know it by heart. But I always say, why is it important to have women in corporate life, in startups, in every aspect of the business? Because between 67 to 70% of global decisions on purchases of services and products fall on women's hands. And it's household products, it's not baby clothes, it's everything. So if you don't have a women's insight when you are designing a product, even if it is a car, a home, whatever, you are missing out on your potential, the one who's going to say yeah or no. If you don't have a woman when you are about to invest in a company, you're going to miss out because you are missing understanding more than half of the total decision maker. And if you don't have women in boards of companies, you're missing out. You don't understand your audience. So, I think when you get to a certain level, it doesn't have to be to the very top. Always look around and see, well, who is that person that can change? I remember one time having somebody who came to me when I was at the bank and said, I want to work in your team. And I said, but you don't have business skills. And she said, yeah, but I believe you'll help me and I will put in all the extra hours I can to make it happen. And then that resonated so much. I said, yeah, and I was given a chance to prove myself. So I have to do it. So I said, sure, I'll make the case to transfer you from this unit that was much more focused on knowledge to the investment unit. When I left the bank, she's one of the best investment officers you have. And to this day, we meet every week on Zoom and once in a while personally, because, she knows that I gave her a chance. And I'm so proud when people, a month ago, she was in Bolivia speaking at the panel, and a lot of my friends were telling me, oh, look at so and so, she rocks the panel. And I felt that's my mission. I'm not going to last forever on this earth, but how nice to think that I have inspired many, many young women that will take over. And that's another thing. To those of us who have made it to the top, we have to know when to step down or to begin to delegate. So I'm not ready to step down, but I'm more than willing to delegate and to make the space wider and broader. Why? Because I'm nurturing the generation that will take over when I'm ready to step down. And we see that many times women, and I saw that a lot in nonprofits, prefer to allow the nonprofit die out before they really delegate. That's wrong. That's wrong in men and that's wrong in women. So I love it when I see, that the ones that are more the oldies but goodies are very conscious of looking and seeing people following you and thinking, you all are going to be there when I'm not there actively. And, it will be my staying over forever. When you see the next generation, you last in them. You'll have teach them, you'll have mentor them. So I want also to inspire the women who made it or who are on the way to make it to the top to always think the more the merrier, the broader your impact, your name, your influence will last beyond your lifetime.
Right. But one thing, like you said, that you're the only female leader at your company in the leadership level. That itself says that at the leadership level, we have very few women representation. So why is that the case? And it's not like it's been there only for about 5 to 10 years. It's been going on and on for ages now, and it's not been changed. It's not like the statistics have really moved from 0 to 1. It's just 0 point maybe 0.2. So how is it? I mean, why is it that we are not able to move the needle as such?
Well, we have talked a lot about the external factors, but let me say that many times you are your worst enemy. If you don't believe that you can make it, you are going to cut you off at some point. And this is a conversation I have a lot, like with my partners at Capria. When we post a new position, it's hard for us to get a lot of women, and we want to get the most number of women, and it's hard. Or maybe they drop off halfway into the interview process. So men tend to stick more to the full complete process. So I think women in some cultures don't give themselves a chance to shine, and this
Why?
happens at, yeah.
Yeah. No, I
Now
just had said that why is it that women drop off from the interviews in between and not complete it fully?
I think they begin to think, oh, this is gonna interfere in other personal plans I have. And a man doesn't think that way. A man thinks will make it happen and will accommodate. So that's a chip in our brain that we have to switch. You can accommodate, you can be more inclusive. I always tell the story of a Mexican young woman that I love, and she's in a position of power in a very important private equity venture capital fund. And she left one firm because she could see, she was very loved in that firm, but she was never gonna make it to be a partner. So she began to interview, and she shared with me that in the interview, she did the unthinkable. She was a newly married young woman, and she asked in the interview, "Well, I'm really interested, but what if next year I want to have a kid?" And the firm said, "Listen, we have very few women, and I think it is because we have been very unfriendly to women and to make them feel comfortable with their choices. So, sure, we'll accommodate you." And then she went on and she said, "This, I couldn't even believe I blurted out of my mouth in this interview." And I said, "Well, what about if a year after I have my first kid, I get pregnant again?" And the guy said, "We will accommodate you." So then, she said, "This is the firm I want to be in." So as it happened, she joined the firm as a senior, not partner. She was too young, but she's in a career track to become. And after a while, she did get pregnant. And you know what happened? She had to design the policy for maternity leave, paternity leave, because they hadn't had women that were mothers in the company. So it was incredible for her to think, because they accepted me, now I'm charting the way for others. But she made sure that it was for others, men and women. So I think, again, it goes back to believing in you. And when I mentor women, I always say this, but it can also apply to men. Men can be insecure too, but I think you have to think of your life as a movie, and you have to decide to be the director, the producer, the writer, and the actor in that movie. You make the choices, you assume the consequences of your choices, and you keep going. You don't allow others to write the plot for you. You take over. And when you are in a relationship, you share, you look for the person who is going to understand and admire you and not feel pulled down by your success. A while ago, I was in Argentina meeting with some friends. We are all investors, and our husbands are incredible. And we said, maybe we should write a book on the men who don't have a chip on their shoulders and are proud of the accomplishments of their wives, because that also makes it easier. And I know, my partners who are married, they are so proud of what their wives are doing, never putting them down, never thinking, oh, what I do is more important. No, each one has a place in the professional world and in the world. And you
Yeah.
have to find people who will understand that, to walk life together with them.
Yeah, I think accommodation is the key word here, not just with others, but self accommodation as well. And when we speak of more women dropping out, I think you mentioned the reason very clearly, that offices are not very supportive of the biological and the physiological changes that a woman goes through. And hence, these days, what we call as period leaves is also becoming mandatory in few organizations. And we see so many women join those kind of places. So I think the change, if it has to come through, needs to be from within first, second at home, and then third at your office. And I think with that, we might see some change in numbers. But
Yeah, and I think, small improvements in an office, like having lactancy rooms, can make a whole difference, and really, what does it take? Maybe you take out a cubicle. And now that women are more working at home and men too, well, it made it easy in some regards, in other regards, it didn't. But again, depending on the countries, it was the first time that I saw men saying, I have to cut the conversation short because I have to pick up my daughter. And I said, well, good for you. Finally, you are picking up your children from school, not only the women. So, but if you're back into an office environment, do it more welcoming in the same way that this goes beyond women. It goes to disabled person. So you have to have a more welcoming environment if you are in an in-person environment. So you're not the oddball person. You're not the weird person who, has a baby in her arms. Well, get the father to have the baby in his arms too.
yeah, that's so true. I also read you mention about this, that women are good with having less money and making miracles. So I would love to understand your thought process behind this.
Well, I think we have, and that works for and against us. It works well in a household. It works well, in making decisions because we are more prudent. So in a way, we are better performers in volatile economies. Okay, because we are more prudent. When doesn't it work so well is when you are maybe a founder of a company and you are asking an investor to invest in you. Usually, we tend to think very much, okay, I need X money for the next 6 months. Men tend to think bigger, long term, and investors want to see men and women with a larger vision. So many times, I tell the founder, the woman founder, so if I give you exactly what you're asking for, when will you again be fundraising? And most likely she'll tell me in 6 months or a year. So my advice is not think bigger, ask for double the amount. So in that sense, men have much more of a long-term view and are not afraid to ask for more. But because many times women, even at the personal level in some countries, we are rejected when we ask for a loan. We have that mentality, well, let's ask only for smaller amounts. Now, I would say too, men tend to look a lot on status. And I think if I could have been a man, maybe I would have ended up in that private company and not in the development bank. And my life would have been different, but my influence in the world would have been much less than what I did. So my decision in the end was not about how many zeros to add to my paycheck, but what I wanted to do. And women tend to be more encompassing my effect, my influence in the world, in the planet, in people, and in business, making money. So I think those are good traits. We shouldn't apologize for that, but we also have to be conscious of that. And the last thing I would say is when English is not your first language, your native language, and you have to pitch in English, uh, we tend to be more into details. So if we make a mistake in a verb tense, that could ruin our pitch if we are pitching to an investor. A guy doesn't even care and he keeps showing his passion, his drive. And in the end, the investor is gone with that impression. Oh, this guy was great. And he doesn't remember if he said he have instead of he has. But a woman has to train herself not to be stuck in that and keep going and showing the drive and the passion. Going back to that idea, you are the director, the producer, the writer, and the actor of your own life.
Yeah, I agree to that. And on that point, I mean, as we've read about different studies and what's been happening, women are picked up for the smallest of mistakes as well. And men are not even looked at even if they make a mistake. But I don't know why is there a mindset issue in that as well. But I've been happy seeing that you have created communities for women itself where you invest in women founders. So what specific characteristics have you seen in a women founder which might go missing in men, since you've been into the investing world for many years now?
Well, I think what I just said, women tend to invest to make or to create companies to make money, but also have more present the benefits of the products and services their companies can offer. And in 2022, there is a need to have both investors and founders thinking of how to solve the greatest challenges of humanities with models that are good business models that will give a lot of money. It's not a sin to have money. What it is bad is not to use it well. And women tend to have a more all encompassing vision. So that's important. And also, women tend to be more focused on unit economics of the companies. Men tend to think, oh, let's grow at all costs. And we have seen what happened in 2021, right? The growth at all costs. It was a great party. We all drank too much. We all got a little bit drunk, and now we are sobering up with coffee. Women tend to, in these situations, drink less. They were more cautious. They were still more focused on the unit economics of their companies. And women investors were also looking at, is this company sustainable in a boom environment, but also in a down environment? So their decisions were more prudent. So that's why I think it's so good to have diversified teams, men and women understanding what they bring to their table and listening to each other makes for a fabulous combination.
Yeah, I agree to that. But that also makes me question as to why did you only create a women community for networking
Oh,
mentorship?
yeah. Okay. So I created the women's community because definitely there was a lagging time in Latin America to catch up with women studying STEM careers and then applying them to become entrepreneurs. But from day one, every time I would open that event and talk to a woman entrepreneur, I would say, if you ask me if I favor companies only founded by women, I would say no, because they will have the same biases that companies only founded by men. What I want is men and women working together. So from the very beginning, we try to instill in the women founders the idea of look for a co-founder who is a man who can challenge your ideas and respect you, obviously. Then when they were doing pitch competitions, the jury was not all women, were women and men. When they were mentored, because we have mentoring sessions and training sessions, the trainers and the mentors were both men and women. And then I would try to bring a lot of investors to those meetings. And especially for the men, it was an eye opener. I remember the first event I put together in Miami in 2000. 2013, one of the investors came to me. He was Brazilian, and he said, Susana, now I know how you have felt for all these years when you go to Brazil. I will go back to Brazil and I will make sure that the environment is more conducive to have men and women. And I said, you have to do that. And that kept repeating. So exposing men to women and women to men is what I really wanted to do. And then many years later, in December 2009, when I created the other side of the coin, the foundation We Invest for Women Investors, all of us have partners who are men, and few in the foundation have some dedicated funds only with women partners, but they are the minority. And if you ask me, do you only invest in companies founded by women? No, I invest in the best companies, and some of them are only founded by men, but I make sure that they understand they have to begin to open up the fund and invite those women that they already have in the company to begin to go to decision-making positions in the company. So I don't like preaching to the choir. I like getting new converts, to get the ones who haven't really fully understand the beauty of the business case for women to begin to go on that journey. And that's what we do at Capri as well. We are a global South venture capital fund that have offices in Bangalore, in Nairobi, people in Mexico, in Bogota, in the west coast of the US, in the east coast. And we try to be very diverse in geographies that we have people from, which means different cultures. And it's wonderful to see the differences in cultures, but a lot of women and men that feel, yeah, we have to understand each other. Your language is not 100% my language, so be it, right? And there is one research piece that I want to mention done by Dana Kanse from the Harvard Business School, in which she analyzed investors' feedback to companies that were being pitched by men and companies that were pitched by women. And most of the investors, of course, were men. And for men, the feedback they gave was all positive on growing more, on how to address the challenges of becoming a global company, etc. And for the women, it was totally focused on risk prevention. uh, do you understand the basics of your company? How are you going to prevent the risk of this and that? So it was black and white. And she has been talking about that research for several years. And we try to mention, many of us try to mention that research because I think it's very enlightening of hidden biases. But we have to put it on the table that why are we, when we have a company or an idea, being asked prevention questions, and for men they are being asked like growth and very positive questions. So it's something that all of us have to check on our hidden biases.
Yeah, which answers my question, like women anyways have less exposure, and if you get them to interact with more men founders or co-founders and investors, it will anyways make their network bigger, which indeed is a great initiative. So how was it initially when you started, and how is it going now? What difference do you observe in the women who have been in your cohort for a longer time?
Oh my gosh, it's been day and night. Latin America in 2010 had very few women. I think the entrance of accelerators also um, allowed, because accelerators were focusing on numbers, allowed women to enter. And the accelerator mentality was more, let's pivot an idea. And before that, pivoting meant you're a failure. I just came back from New York. Last night, I was at a conference all about the Middle East and meeting also a lot of entrepreneurs from North Africa and the Middle East. And they were all telling me, they don't understand that pivoting a company is not bad. It's your way to success. So, I think we have come a long way in Latin America. I'm beginning to see the same in Africa, where I also work. Um, there is a sense of you are allowed to try and test, and therefore women feel less intimidated entering there. I think it's still, maybe in Southeast Asia, the environment is very competitive, but it is competitive also for men. So we have to keep changing the dynamics. But what it started as a crazy idea in 2013, 10 years later, I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of women entrepreneurs in Latin America who have founded companies that are way on their way to become unicorns or are unicorns, like the typical case of Nubank. But the press doesn't help. Nubank is always related to David Vélez, but they forget about Cristina Junqueira, who is a co-founder. And the two times it just so happens that they rang the bell in the New York Stock Exchange, Christina was pregnant. So Forbes and other press, caught the picture of her with a very prominent belly. And, she was at the New York Stock Exchange ringing the bell for Nubank. So those are the pictures that can change the dynamics of the conversation. And we have to make sure that we also appeal to the press to tell the stories of real women with real stories and great companies.
Yeah, I know media coverage plays a great role in spreading this information out, because corporate world anyways is very insider community that you won't know unless you're into it. And of course any outsider would feel insecure, if they don't know what's happening around. So I think this coverage really helps there. But you were also gender initiatives coordinator at the IDB, where you were working initially. So why did you think there was a need for a gender coordination at the first place? What was the disparity existing?
Well, it had to do with having invested by then in many, many venture capital funds that were only run by men. So we began thinking at all levels in our project how to ensure that the conversation was brought up right early on in trying to make either a grant, a loan, or an investment in a venture capital fund or a company. And we saw the need for that. I have to say that the first times I was addressing that with some men, they said, "Oh no, we have women in our company," and I knew what was going to happen. They would call their administrative assistants, and I said, "Listen, I believe that every job is very dignified, and I don't mean to put down your administrative assistant, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about women in decision making positions." "Oh, no." "Well, you have to create the ecosystem for that. I just hired the best." So when I heard that 2, 3 times, I said, "Okay, I understood. They are not going to do it. We have to do it." And then is when I created the initiative for the women founders. And then we began to really make the point that if I was analyzing an investment and there were two excellent investment potentials, and one understood the business case for women and the other one didn't, I with no doubt was going to go for this one. Now, if I had two possibilities, one had women and diversified teams and the other one didn't, but this one was better, I was going to invest in this one and make sure that in 5 years they had a very different landscape in their companies. So it was a lot about really being very intentional, the same way that you have to be intentional when you say, "Look, we are not going to invest in a company that harms the environment." Well, we have to be intentional in saying, "Look, you are all a bunch of men. and you have to change that. I don't want you to look at us as at a number to make your investor happy. I want you to take the time to understand the issue, look first inside your company and see who can be the next generation of leaders, and then begin to really work that the change happens in a time frame that is intentional. 2 years, 3 years, you tell me and we'll work together. So it's a lot of work, but it pays off.
Yeah, but I also had this interesting question which I asked earlier and lost the reasoning somewhere. I wanted to know that why women are discounted for making small mistakes and men aren't. I just would like to know the reason. Why is it?
Well, depending on the country, men too are also put down if they make mistakes. But I would say that we personally tend to be more down if we make a mistake because we tend to be more in the details. We, some of us lack some self-confidence. And so, but I think in some cultures, punishing those who fail and want to get up and keep going cuts across genders. But the impact on women is harder because men, you have more of what you call serial entrepreneurs, men who have done several, created several companies, so they are more accustomed to see problems, correct them, address them, and keep going. So for women who are starting on the entrepreneurial journey, maybe at the first mistake, they feel, well, maybe I'm not cut out for this. So that's
Yeah.
where we are still lagging behind. But when you get a woman who is on her second or third company, she's on equal footing with the men.
Yeah, I think it's again about how inherently confident you feel about what you're presenting and pitching about. But you've also written about how VC investors can make a strong pitch for getting their own investments. So if you could just explain to our audience about how which pointers should they be noticing for, and how founders can also benefit from this, and what should they involve in their pitch decks.
Well, this applies to all men and women, but I would say that for women, first of all, train yourself to pitch in English and not to be, record yourself. And if you make a grammar mistake, so be it. Keep going all the time. Then the second thing I would say is that know your financials very well. It's not acceptable that you are on a pitch, things are going well, the investor is beginning to get totally like, oh, I like this company. And all of a sudden, he says, oh, okay, can you tell me about your revenues year on year? And then all of a sudden, you're like, um, well, I will put you in touch with my CFO. You kill your pitch. You have to feel confident about your numbers. So that is a mistake that unfortunately I have seen too many times when women pitch, that they don't feel confident talking about financial numbers, even if they know it. But I have to say that in general, they know it less than men talking about financials. So those two things are important. Then practice a lot, get feedback from maybe potential investors that you don't care that much. So you're pitching maybe to an investor that you feel, no, I don't think I'm gonna get money from this investor. Do it anyway as a practice because you learn, and then learn from what they tell you and ask for feedback. If they say, well, typical, congratulations, but will pass on your opportunity, ask them, can you give me feedback? Write down those feedback and improve from there. So I know many years ago, and they attended the first event I did for women in STEM. two entrepreneurs who have created a beauty tech company. And they went after my event, they went to Silicon Valley. They have like meetings with 30, 40 investors, and they felt we are going to go back to Uruguay and we are going to be, you know, with tons of money. And they talk about going back to Uruguay with zero money and a lot of doors slammed on their faces. And they said, well, we had two choices. We could gather at our office and cry and said, let's forget it. We are not cut out for this. Or let's put down every criticism we got and make this company better. So I'm gonna make this story short because we are running out of time. But you know, at some point that company was acquired by a U.S. multinational, and one of the founders stayed in the US multinational, and the other one decided to create another beauty tech company that is doing very well. And the one who stayed in the multinational, after a few years, that company decided to create a small venture fund for beauty tech companies. So she's now the manager of that fund. So, and these women are young, they are in their 30s. So, isn't it a wonderful story of how you can incorporate criticism, feedback, and no's to your proposal and make your company better?
Yeah, indeed it is. But how much time do you have? I'll ask my other questions accordingly.
How much time? What?
How much time do you have? You said you're running short of time, so I'd just like to know what's your bandwidth. So I'll ask my questions accordingly.
Okay, yeah. Um, I think I have like 10 more minutes. Can
Okay,
it be?
great. I think
Okay.
we have good time. Okay, it's going on so interestingly well that it didn't even realize that it's past 1 hour. But on to the other question that you have been into this space since the dot-com bust happened, and even before that, and you said that $1 million deals would have just been written down on napkins and would have been done in just a couple of days. Well, that is not the case now. So if you could give us how they give us a scenario of how it was back then while you were into the world of investing and how it is now, and also what were your learnings or mistakes from your years so far.
Okay, I would say that the world of the dot com, especially in emerging economies, was crazy. People were believing that Silicon Valley could be replicated in Argentina, in Brazil, in Colombia. It cannot. It cannot even replicate it in other parts of the US. The Boston tech community, very different from Silicon Valley. The Texan community, very different. The New York industry, venture capital environment, very different. So people were living a dream and trying to get others to do it. And there is something that is important. Many investors began to have fear of missing out and accepted things that were not right. So of course, when the crash came and came hard, there were a lot of learnings of how to again focus on the economics of a company and not just on something, oh, this is going to go exponential. Why? Based on what? How do you know the culture? How do you tell me that the company in Colombia is going to go to India? Who do you know in India? Venture capital is local, so you're crazy. But at the time, we were all believing in this crazy idea. I think what happened in 2021 was different because technology was adopted in a much more established way than back in 1999 2000, but still it was crazy. The valuations were crazy, and you had companies that were born in January 2021 and by November they were unicorn. I always stayed away from those because I said this is not sustainable, and it's not sustainable in the US, it's not sustainable in Africa, in Latin America, in India. So which unicorns I like? The ones that have been there for a while, that have grown as a company with sound unit economics, And yes, all of a sudden, because the environment was very conducive, they became unicorns. But you look at those and it took them 12 years to become unicorns, some 8 years, some 5 years. But the ones that were overnight, I think they are gonna come crashing down if they haven't yet, or what they are doing is because they don't want to risk a down round, they are taking debt as opposed to face another valuation. So that's a lesson I learned, that when you see a bubble growing, you have to be skeptical. When I was leaving the IDB, we have a last meeting with all our fund managers in 2019. And I look at the room full of fund managers and I said, well, few of you lived, because they were young, through the bubble. Some of you have. And I have to tell you, in this last meeting before I leave the IDB, my departing words is like, watch it. There is a lot of brewing of the champagne going on the bubblies, but at some point the champagne will fizzle down and you don't want to be in that game. So people now are telling me, yeah, you said it. And I said, yeah, and I write those things. A while ago, last year, I wrote about what I saw in 22 years investing in Latam. And I made a warning about IPOs and SPACs because, there are certain conditions that don't improve overnight. So it's always tough for companies from emerging markets to be listed. And usually they suffer in the shares. And if you don't list when it is the right moment, you're making a disservice to the whole industry. Because then everybody will point at you and say, oh, look at your share price. It's only going down instead of up. So know when is the time, for an entrepreneur to decide to take his or her company to an IPO is very important. It has a huge responsibility. Mm. So, and then another lesson that I got in my IDB years quite early, when I started in 1999, um, there have been already a few investments made. Many of them were on green funds. At the time, when not too many were focusing on renewable energy and solar panels, we were. But our biggest mistake is that we didn't understand this idea that impact without financial returns is no impact, because nothing is sustainable if you don't have the financial sustainability. So we had invested in several funds that were run by NGOs converted into fund managers. And 3 years later, when I came in, I just came in at the time of an evaluation of those funds. And what I saw was that the fund managers were very committed to the earth. They were committed, as I began saying afterwards, they were committed to the green in the planet. They were not committed to the green in the dollars. And so everything they supported in the end was lost. They lost the companies, therefore they lost their effect on the planet, and they lost a lot of jobs. So that was a learning that changed my path on venture capital. And I began talking that impact without financial sustainability is no impact. And that was a very contrarian view when I was at the development financial institution. But that was one of the reasons why Capria was a very good place for me to go and become a partner, because they believe in that. We have impact in our DNA, but not at the cost of financial returns. We understand that a company focused on financial returns, focus on providing access to millions of services and products that they need to have a better life, is the key to the sound unicorns of the future.
Yeah, before I could ask you about Capria, you answered it itself as to what do you all do. But lastly, I would like to hear about your hiring strategy as to, do you believe in a hierarchical model, a lockstep model, or meritocratic? And I have a follow on to that basis what you answer.
Of course, I believe on meritocracy, because otherwise I wouldn't be where I am, you know. So, and I think, again, that was important for me when choosing what would be my next place. And, you know, it was a very different world. The world of a development financial institution is much more political because our funding comes from governments, and it is much more hierarchical. So I was looking for a firm that, in which, of course, you have partners and the decision lies on us after we hear to everybody else. And
Yeah,
that's something that, for example, in our investment committees, we have vowed that the four members of the investment committee are the founders and the partners in the fund, but we don't express our opinion unless the associates and even the fellows in our firm have said what they think about the company. Why? Because we know if we already are the first ones speaking, the others will not want to speak. They will feel like, oh, he's for or against. So if I'm for and he's against, or if I'm against and she's for, I will be looked down, which wouldn't be the case, but still. And, you know, because we are very passionate, many times we forget about that and we began talking, and some other partner will say, Susana, let the associates and the fellows give their opinion first, or will they, let's do that. So we help one another to have that idea that everybody has a voice and
mm,
everybody should be listened to.
yeah. But help me understand this, that what if a second year associate is performing better than a fifth year principal? Do you also make the compensation on an equal level or on a level where it matches? Because then we speak, if we speak of meritocracy, then it should also reflect in the compensation, right? So,
Absolutely. And in thus, you know, as a venture capital firm that is still young, we our main core is not the base salary, it's the short term and the long term bonus, is being vested and getting carry. So it can be that the principal obviously will have a base salary that is bigger than the associate. But if the associate is performing much better, where the principal will be adjusted, will be in the short-term bonus, in the long-term bonus, in the shares she'll get and the carry she'll get long-term. So definitely our way of compensating includes that idea of perform well and you will be rewarded. And even when we have fellows that are not part of our, they are not employees, they are fellows, many of them become employees. And, you know, a fellowship at Capria can last between 6 to 12 months. If the person likes us and we like that person, um, he or she can become an employee less than, you know, a year into the fellowship. And then I'm thinking of a real case. He became a fellow, then 6 months into it or even less, we said, this, he's amazing, let's offer him to become an associate. And some months afterwards we realized we this is not the right position for him. He should be a senior associate. So all that happened in less than 18 months. So we reward talent. We reward hunger for learning, for getting out there and risking it and learning more and be there and collaborate. We wouldn't, it can be that the person can be a genius, but is not a good team player. He would be penalized in that short-term bonus, I assure you, are very important. So not understanding, for example, how the client acquisition cost can kill your company if you don't get a hold of it. In the beginning, it tends to be larger, but after a while, if it doesn't go down, there is something wrong with your model. And then I would say the other mistake that may happen is that the founder is looking for what I call mini-me's. people with the same educational background, the same region or country or language or ideas or gender. I think that's wrong.
Mini-me's is a word, is it? Like I'm hearing it for the first time.
Well, mini-me's come from stupid movie many years ago in which the effect is a mini me is when you see yourself reflected in somebody else and you say, oh yeah, we studied in the same university, oh yeah, we came from the same community, oh yes, we think alike in this and this, and in the end it's a mini me, it's a reflection of yourself. A good founder needs a co-founder that will challenge his or her views, his or her ideas, and together they will grow and make it better. But if you
Right.
have a yes person all along, you'll make more mistakes. Nobody's challenging you. So you said, oh, let's go this way. Yes. Oh, let's change course. Yes. No, you have to have somebody. Why? Why do you want to go that way? Why do you want to change course? How are we going to get there? Do we have the team to change course? So all that happens when there are no mini-me's. There are very different people. And that is something that, for example, I laugh and I said in Capria, we are all very different and the partners are very different and with very different backgrounds. That's good. That's not bad. That's good.
Yeah, that's good. But solopreneurs, you don't prefer investing in them, is it? Because a lot of people are.
Yeah, I don't believe in solopreneurs because I also think that we have to be very pragmatic. Nobody has their lifetime on earth guaranteed. And COVID was quite a lesson in that. I have to say that sadly, I know now either solo fund managers or solopreneurs who died during COVID. And if they would have had a co-founder or a partner, they, their ideas would have survived them. So I also look into the succession of a firm, whether it is an investment firm or a startup. It's important. You have to have a sense of history, of legacy. What I create is not for me, it's for the many, many more that will come after me. So I understand becoming a solopreneur, but hopefully very soon you'll find your partner.
Yeah, but like on that, I would just like to take an advice from you that I'm myself a solopreneur right now, and I don't know how to get a co-founder for myself, being a woman especially. So how can a person find a co-founder for themselves?
Get yourself into the events that you can find many people like you. Get to know people who want to start a venture like you do and go to those events, whether they are pitch competitions or venture capital industry events or accelerator events, and begin to talk about the idea, why don't we join forces? Again, the C of collaboration is key. You know, make known your wish to collaborate because together you'll be stronger.
Yeah, that's a good advice. Thanks a lot for giving your 2 hours. It was so enriching to hear each and every experience that you shared. And I'm sure that this is really going to be one of the best interviews that our audience would love to hear. It shares so many different perspectives because you have been across geographies and your funds in itself have been across different places in the globe. But yeah, I really admired listening to you. You don't come to India. I see you have an office
Not
in that.
yet. Yeah, we do have several investments in India. My partners, Dave and Will, go to India. We try to divide ourselves
Okay.
geographically, but nobody has said I won't be in India at some point. So if I will, glad to meet you.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.